All right, let's jump right into this explainer by challenging something we pretty much all take for granted. When you hear the word intelligence, what pops into your head? Probably a standardized test, right? Maybe a super high IQ score or someone doing crazy mental math. But what if that's just a tiny piece of the puzzle? What if the actual definition of being smart completely changes depending on where in the world you happen to be standing? Today, we're unpacking the wild ways that culture literally shapes your mind. Take a second and picture the absolute smartest person you know. Got 'em? Now ask yourself, why are they smart? Is it purely because they aced every test in high school? Or is it because of how they handle themselves in the real world, how they read a room or solve everyday problems? Instinctively, we all kind of know that true intelligence is a lot bigger than just filling in bubbles on a multiple choice exam. So if it's not just about test scores, what is it? Well, scientifically speaking, a massive defining characteristic of intelligence is simply your ability to adapt. It's not just about reasoning abstractly, it's about how successfully you deal with your specific environment. If you live in a certain place, being intelligent literally means having the exact skills you need to survive and thrive, right there in that specific setting. And that brings us to culture. You know the old saying, culture is the water we swim in? Well, just like a fish adapts to water without even realizing it's wet, we constantly adapt to our culture. It's this huge collective system of customs, beliefs, attitudes, and art that surrounds us. And your personal intelligence, it is heavily, heavily tuned by those exact cultural parameters. Back in the day, the Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky hit the nail on the head with this. He argued that culture actually provides the social context where we live, grow, and make sense of the world. He pointed out something super interesting. Basic functions, like crying or having a sense of smell, those are universal. But higher mental functions, things like complex problem solving, those are largely produced by our culture. Because cultures grow and change, they basically dictate what a successful intellect looks like. And modern psychology is totally backing this up. Take Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence, for example. It specifically highlights something called contextual intelligence. Basically, this is the idea that what we consider an intelligent action is entirely dictated by what a particular culture values. Practical intelligence doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It implies that intelligence itself is a direct product of the culture you're raised in. So that brings us to a really fascinating question. What does your society actually value? Because depending on where you live, the definition of acting smart sharply changes. Think about it. Does your society prize blazing fast problem solving and individual trophies? Or does it care more about group harmony and deep self-reflection? Those big societal goals shape how kids are raised, which, in turn, directly wires the minds of the people living there. This massive cultural divide basically gives us two completely different frameworks for thinking. On one side, we have what psychologists call technological intelligence, which is heavily pushed in Western cultures. On the other side, we have integral intelligence, which you'll see a lot more in Asian and African cultures. Let's break down what makes these two approaches so fundamentally different. Okay, so in technologically advanced Western societies, kids are raised to develop skills like generalization, abstraction, speed, and mental manipulation. It's a very individualistic setup, highly focused on personal achievement. And here is the real kicker. The intelligence tests developed in Western cultures, they are looking precisely for those exact skills. So a standard IQ test isn't necessarily measuring some universal, absolute brain power. It's really just measuring how well you've mastered Western technological intelligence. But flip the script, and that technological approach isn't nearly as prized in many Asian and African societies. Instead, they lean heavily into integral intelligence. So rather than just looking at isolated individual brain power, these cultures look for how well you relate to others. They deeply value self-reflection and a collectivistic mindset. Now, sure, the boundaries between these two are slowly fading because of Western influence, but traditionally, the integral approach says a truly smart person is someone deeply connected to their social world. A totally perfect example of this integral approach is the Indian concept of buddhi. Now, while it's often just translated to intelligence in English, buddhi is way, way broader. According to researcher J.P. Das, buddhi isn't just cognitive crunching. It includes mental effort, determined action, feelings, and opinions. It's fundamentally about the knowledge of your own self based on conscience, will, and desire. So it relies heavily on emotions and motivation, not just cold, hard logic. To really wrap your head around how holistic this is, let's look at the four facets of buddhi. Number one is cognitive capacity. stuff like understanding context and problem solving. But the other three are just as crucial. You've got social competence, which means respecting social order and caring for others. Then there's emotional competence, being honest and regulating your feelings. And finally, entrepreneurial competence. And actually, scratch that. It's not about starting a business. It's about persistence, patience, and hard work. In this tradition, if you can't regulate your emotions or respect others, you literally aren't considered intelligent. And honestly, this holistic view makes so much sense. The research explicitly notes that a high IQ and great grades just aren't enough to guarantee success in life. I mean, we all know that one person who aced absolutely every test in school, but they constantly struggle to keep a job or maintain healthy relationships, right? Standard cognitive intelligence just completely falls short when it comes to navigating the messy reality of human interaction.
Which brings us perfectly to the modern psychological concept of emotional intelligence, or EQ. Emotional intelligence broadens the whole idea of intellect beyond just academics to actually include our emotions. It's the ability to accurately appraise, express, and regulate your feelings to help guide your thinking. It's the feeling side of intelligence. And if you think about it, this modern concept built incredibly well right on top of that ancient Indian tradition of buddhi we were just talking about.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. Which type of intelligence do you rely on the most in your day-to-day life? Are you navigating your world strictly relying on the speed and abstraction of technological intelligence? Or are you actively building up the social, emotional, and integral skills you need to genuinely connect with people and thrive? Next time you call someone smart, maybe take a second to consider exactly what kind of smart they really are. Thanks so much for joining me.